Hello, this is a Tradesight educational video. We're going to take a look tonight at the Tradesight Seeker tool. I had someone the other day ask me when you look at it on a daily chart, and by the way, these Seeker and Comer tools, they work on any time frame, on any asset class. But when you look at them on the daily charts, where they're obviously so powerful, somebody said, what percentage win, what percentage don't work for picking the reversal point in the market? And can you show us some examples of ones that don't work instead of just showing us examples of ones that do? So what I did was I went through some lists of stocks. I mean, I can't go through every one in the market, looking for stocks that have had Seeker 13 buy or sell signals somewhere in the last 6 months or so. Not all stocks even have a signal. And I put together that list of everything I could just find, wasn't selective in any way, and made a list of the ones that didn't work and the ones that did work. And we're going to look through that today and just kind of get a feel for how well this tool works. Now, start by, here's a chart of ZYNE. And every time you get a red numeric count that gets to 13, that is the reversal, the exhaustion signal, where the market should reverse. I'm putting this one up first because it has an example of where it did work, and it has an example of where it didn't work. It got two signals so far in the last 6 or 7 months. So if you look back on the left side of the chart here, you can see a 13 in late September. That was the top day. We rolled over, and it was 2 months later before we kind of came back up a bit. So that's an example of the exhaustion signal working, giving you the top at the time. A little while later, if you look at the end of December, there's a 13 signal, and basically for 2 or 3 days it went sideways, but that is not the symbol or the signal working. And then it broke out above the highs and kept going from there. So that is an example of one that did not work. So I've got this chart up as sort of to show you and demonstrate to you what these signals look like. It's the 13 that matters. When the count is below the candles on the chart, that means that if you get to a 13, it's a buy signal. Here, the two examples are sell signals. Very uncommon to see two of them so close together like you do on this chart. So I thought it was a good example to start with. So we're going to be looking at a bunch of charts, and we're going to go through. I'm going to start with the ones that I found that did not work. So there's the ZYNE has one that didn't. All right, so here's a look at Netflix. Now, if you look at Netflix, this is one that also has actually had 3. This is uncommon, but has had 3 in the last 6 or 7 months. One back, again, late September. That one actually did work. You got to pull back for about 2 weeks before the market gapped up on earnings. We don't hold stocks through earnings anyways. Another one was in early December, and that one did not really work. It went sideways. Yes, it did go sideways for 2 or 3 weeks, but ultimately really didn't go down at all from the signal and then went back up. And we've actually got a new 13 sell signal in place on Netflix right now that's so far, but we're only 2 days into it, so far is working. But again, I think the examples on this chart are not very good. Like one definitely didn't work, one barely worked, one we just got. CRZO, another one. So here's one is an example I want to show you of a buy signal. You can see the 13, the red 13, as it descended in December and January. We got the signal in late January for a buy, and it did not work. The stock did not go up from there at all. In fact, it proceeded lower within a couple weeks, but never even really bounced even enough to suggest an exhaustion. Here's Iridium, IRDM. So this is a fourth one that has an example that did not work. Okay, so you can see back in November, you got the 13 signal. Yes, it did go sideways for a week, but it did not go down at all, and in fact proceeded higher not too much long after that. So those are all examples of what didn't work. Let's take a few examples of ones that did. I'll start with UCBI. Now there's actually 2 signals here. Oh, this one has one. I wanted to show this one because it does have one that doesn't work first. If you look back in the beginning of November, there was a 13. It didn't work. And it looks like there's some kind of news because the stock took off running right through the 13. About 2 days later, it did not work at all. But then what's amazing, if you do get 2 13 signals almost back to back, the second one will almost always work, especially if it's in a move. And that's what this is supposed to be measuring as exhaustion. You know, if you look at that first 13 from September to November, the stock was pretty flat most of the way, right? So what are you exhausted from? But look at on this next move, the one where you run up in November and into December, that's a pretty big move, right? So now you get your exhaustion. It's literally the high candle of the move is the 13 signal, and that worked. That's actually the high close to this day on the stock. And then the next one we got another 13 signal. But again, look at this one. We basically go sideways to get to that 13 signal. So is that as meaningful of a measuring exhaustion? So far it has worked. So far that has caused rollover, but it wouldn't be as meaningful. I think the big one here is the middle one where you get that big exhaustion move, and if you're in the stock, How do you find the top? And this one called it to the day. Let's take a look at EXAS. This one, the signal was way back in September, but it came out and worked perfectly. The stock went lower for 4 or 5 months before finally recovering, but definitely caught the turn there on that stock. HCSG, another one. Look at this, 13. Now this is a new signal, but look at this, 13 sell signal. This was just 2 or 3 days ago, and it's actually dropped quite a bit, a couple points already for a $40 stock just since that signal. So already working there. TSEM. Look at this one. 13 sell signal. This has the example that didn't work. There's one in December, and then it went higher, but there's the other one here in February that in the pink line gives you what they call the risk level off of that sell signal. So basically it says, here's the 13. This is where we think the top's going to start to be, and we really don't think you're going to get above the pink line. And look how perfectly it uses that pink line and never gets above it. So that signal worked. MMSI. Here's a 13 signal about 3 weeks ago. Pretty right on the money. And also there was one back at the end of September. Also worked right on the money. News Corp, NWS. 13 sell signal a couple days ago, 5 days ago. Straight down ever since. NCLH. Norwegian Cruise Lines. Look at that. Look at that one. 13 on the spike up day gives you the 13, the exhaustion. That's been the high so far on NCLH. T2, Take-Two Interactive. This one came out in February after a decent move up. I mean, the stock's been on a roll from 42 to 60 over the course of 7 months or so. And we got a 13 sell signal right there in February on the high candle. It's been the high so far on the stock, so I'd say that's pretty on the money. Blue had a 13 sell signal about 3 weeks ago, and basically the high, one day after that, and then it rolled over. So that's pretty much on the money. Kite Pharma. This one, you have to extend the chart to see it. Actually, sorry, I brought this one on for 2 reasons. There's a 13 sell signal back in September that caused the rollover. It's almost formed a 13. One more needs to get a new one more day in the signal. So it needs to basically go up for a couple days in a row to get the 13 here now currently. But it definitely looks extended at this point. So I would say once you get that signal, it will be valid. Lululemon. Look at the buy signal on this one. Way back in October. Right? Way back in October. And by the way, there's 2 ways to look at this tool. It's got a couple of different settings. And they're both just as accurate. One just gives you a slightly different result based on how you do the bar counts. Okay, and on this one in particular, I can switch to a different system basically, where it's all about 9s and 13s. But also, if you get 18 in a row, which is 2 sets of 9, it changes where the count begins. So when I do that on this particular chart, look at this. The 13 buy signal is 3 days before the stock turns up and gaps up. Pretty amazing right there. Rost Stores, R-O-S-T. This one had a 13 sell signal here back in early February, and then the pink risk line saying, okay, you won't go above that from here, and it has not. It's rolled over and working very well. ALDR, another one. This one had a 13 buy signal back in January, and look at the move up. I mean, it's already happened at this point, but look at the way it held that pink line, never closed underneath it after you got the 13, right? And then, you run up, I mean, for a $20 stock to run up to almost 26, that's a pretty good move off of that signal. NVIDIA, 13 sell signal back at the beginning and the end of January, gave you basically the high there. Which AFSI. 13 sell signal back in October. That is still the high on the stock to this day, but definitely worked at the time. Not that you'd still be in it today from that signal. SHOR got a 13 sell signal back in September. Look at that decline. It started a couple days after you got the sell signal. SWKS, and here's one that I wanted to point out because the signal is recent. It's only happened a few days back, and the stock was up a little bit today, but ran into the risk line. So if that continues to contain the market, that signal can still play out. It's just something to be watching right about now. SCHN, look at this one. Big move up in September, October, November, right at the start of December. 13 sell signal. It's the high candle of the whole move, and we've been down ever since. Pretty much nailed it on that one. CHW. Here's a 13 buy signal right at the end of the year, beginning of the year, whatever, somewhere last days of December, early days of January, and the stock took off running from that point. WWD, just a couple left here. WWD, there you go, 13 sell signal in February, and the risk line, and it used it perfectly and did not get through. And Amazon, this one's interesting because it had a 13 sell signal, exhaustion signal back in the middle of February after a decent move up from $720 to $860 a share, got the 13 signal, and then went straight sideways for over a month. So I'd say the signal gave you the exhaustion point. Now it's on a new move. By the way, I point out, though, this one's now, if I go to projection mode, 11 candles up. So it could easily get a new 13 signal, exhaustion signal in a couple days. And then Google recently had a 13 sell signal about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, and that was the high on Google. So just going through what I could, and maybe 1,000 stocks, and pulling the ones that had signals. We've got a handful that didn't work, and we've got many, many more, counting more like 25, 30 that did work, and they all worked pretty darn well. So that's the power of the tool, and you can apply it. We use it for intraday trading as well. You can apply it to smaller time frames. But I think it continues to be one of the most powerful tools in the market, certainly something that I use every day. It's been a Tradesight market overview.